it's Rachel, and it's the end of October, so I'm going to be telling you guys what I read this month. So if you watched my October TBR video, you're going to notice that I definitely did not meet all my goals, but that's fine. I met most of them. I got close. I didn't meet most of them, but I got close. So I'd like to start off by saying that I managed to read 10 books this month, which was pretty good considering I had to finish my 8-week anthropology course, write a project for it, 5 pages I think it was, and I had a lot going on, so that's pretty good. I also managed to read quite a few short stories for school for my American literature class, and so that really helped. The first book I read was Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I gave this book 4 stars on Goodreads. It was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was spooky. It was really messed up. It was totally ready to get me in the mood for Halloween, and I loved it. So this is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, and Bill Hodges is a detective. So this is more of a thriller/horror type of thing than his other books are. So it was more crime and mystery than horror, but it was still pretty scary because it was more realistic than some of his more fantastical things like The Shining or Carrie or Salem's Lot, things of that nature. So this man, known as the Mercedes Killer, stole a Mercedes and he ran over a large group of people in line at a job fair because there was an economic recession. They were trying to get jobs. It was a struggle. And he killed quite a few people and injured more. And so Bill Hodges is a retired detective, and he is obsessed kind of with the Mercedes Killer. He was really disappointed that he did not manage to catch the Mercedes Killer while he was still on the police force. And when the Mercedes Killer sends him a letter in the mail, he decides that he's going to go out without the help of the cops and solve this mystery. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone who's thinking of trying Stephen King out. If you're interested in a nice thriller trilogy kind of thing going on. And yeah. Of course, the next full book I read this month was Finders Keepers by Stephen King, and this is the second book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, because my goal this month was to read the whole trilogy. This book does focus on another crime. However, the Mercedes Killer is a side character in this book, and he is supposedly supposed to come back in the 3rd book. This does feature Bill Hodges, and he is solving another large murder, though he's not entirely aware of the fact that he's solving this murder. I gave this book 4 stars on Goodreads, however, I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the Mercedes Killer. And this was good, I did enjoy it, but I also noticed some flaws that kind of bothered me a little. I noticed that the main villain, the murderer in this book, was very much the same person as the Mercedes Killer was. Even though they were different characters, I noticed that they had very similar behaviors, very similar thought processes. They both always blamed everybody else for their problems. And they were kind of just the same character, but not. I didn't like that. I did like the story though, and I'm hoping that I like the 3rd book just as much as I liked the 1st book. This book also was just kind of filler. There was a lot of information. It was over 500 pages of like just a bridge between the 1st and the 3rd books. And it was just a lot for something that was mostly filler. So the next book that I kind of read this October was End of Watch by Stephen King. This is the 3rd book in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, and I am nowhere near done. I am 45 pages in, and it's like 400 pages. So it's a pretty hefty book that I'm definitely not finishing by Halloween, because Halloween is literally tomorrow. So you may be watching this on November 1st. I'm not sure, but I'm filming this the day before Halloween. So Halloween's tomorrow. I just didn't have time to read the entire trilogy like I wanted, but I will be finishing this book in November, so I will let you guys know at the end of November if I like this book. So far, I like this book more than I liked Finders Keepers, but I do not like it as much as Mr. Mercedes, but that's fine. I'm excited. Hopefully it gets better. I'm sure it will. I love Stephen King, so I'm not going to be surprised if I end up falling in love with this book. Next on my list is the Vampire Knight series. Throughout October, I managed to get through volumes 2 through 5 of the Vampire Knight series, and so far, I really love it. I've given every single one of them a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, so it's awesome. It honestly reminds me a lot of Twilight, and I loved Twilight in middle school, so I'm really loving it. I am digging the vampire-human interaction kind of thing. I think it's amazing. Also, I just have to say that the artwork in this is so beautiful, and when I'm reading it, I have to just sit and like take a step back for a second, just let myself appreciate the gorgeous characters because they are all so beautiful. It's amazing. You should read this manga if you like vampires and if you like weird love triangles that don't always necessarily make sense. I will say my biggest issue though is that it's hard to follow at times. Sometimes I can't really tell who's talking. Sometimes I can't tell that there's a flashback. My biggest issue with that was in the 3rd volume. It had a lot of flashbacks and it would keep going from present to past, and there was no indicator that it was doing so. And Yuki didn't necessarily look all that much younger in the past. She looked pretty much the same, and so it was just very difficult to keep track of when we were and when it was taking place. One of them was a dream, but I didn't even know she'd fallen asleep, so it was just a little hard to keep track of, but overall it was still awesome. I really recommend this series to anyone who's looking for a good manga to get into. Speaking of manga, I also started reading another manga series over October. It's called Octave, and it is a lesbian romance manga. It's honestly really good, and so far I've given every volume a 4 out of 5 stars as well. I'm reading it online on my phone. Not a fan of ebooks, but that's how I found it. It was free. It's good so far, and because it's manga, it's easy to just breeze through it. I can read a chapter in like 30 minutes, maybe less, so it's really easy to keep my focus for 15 to 30 minutes. Not so much if it's a whole book. So the next thing I would like to talk about is my other challenge that I gave myself at the beginning of the month, and I'm going to talk about both parts of it at once. That's a bad sign. So I wanted to read a short story from Edgar Allan Poe and a short story from H.P. Lovecraft every week. I have read 2 short stories from Edgar Allan Poe. Kind of. I read The Purloined Letter for my book club, and my book club was also going to be reading Murders in the Rue Morgue. Did not finish it. I hated it. I hated The Purloined Letter. Really killed my mood for reading Poe short stories. I love Poe's horror, but these were 2 mysteries that I'd never read before, and I did not like them at all. They were too rambly. There was too much dialogue. I could not stand them. So we didn't do that. I am reading The Pit and the Pendulum tonight, though, so at least I'll have gotten 3 short stories by Poe in over the course of the month. I also only read The Tomb by H.P. Lovecraft. It was very good. I loved it. It's so far my favorite story by H.P. Lovecraft, but that's all I've read. Maybe I'll try to read one tonight. Maybe I'll read it tomorrow before I go to bed. I was really trying to get my spook on, get in the mood for Halloween. I had a lot of things going on though, so reading from books of this size, it was just very intimidating, and I ended up not doing it, but I'm going to try to keep with both collections of books throughout the year and just read short stories from them whenever I can. However, I did do one of my challenges, and I went above and beyond, so I feel like it makes up for that. I read every single poem by Poe over the course of October. And I mean every single one. My goal was to read one per day, but I ended up reading 2 or 3 per day. So I'm pretty proud of myself with that because he has a lot of poetry and I read all of it. And I enjoyed all of it. So yeah, I got in the mood for spookiness that way and I'm really happy with that. Speaking of Edgar Allan Poe, I also found this month. It is The Raven and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe, and it is illustrated by Pete Katz. So this is a graphic novel with some of Poe's short stories. So it has The Raven, which is a narrative poem, Fall of the House of Usher, The Black Cat, The Mask of the Red Death, and The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather. So I have read The Raven from this. I thought it was amazing. Look at the artwork in this. It is so gorgeous. I fell in love with it. It is so amazing. I found it at Ollie's for $3 as well, so I got really lucky. It does also mean that I read The Raven twice this year. And honestly, I am not disappointed by that because The Raven is literally my favorite poem ever written by anyone. So there we go. I have it in an even more beautiful format now. So next on my reading list for October were some short stories and a play that I read for my English class. So first of all, I read A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the play. I also really enjoyed the fact that since it's an online class, my teacher was able to easily share the film adaptation with us. So I read the play, watched the movie. I got both kind of aspects to it down because it's just so much easier to watch a play than to just read it. I really do love it, but it's not really my favorite play. My favorite play is The Importance of Being Earnest. So nothing will ever top that for me, but it was good. I have read this play before and watched the movie before for my junior year creative writing class, but that was 4 years ago that I did that. So here we are. I'm reading it again for school. Again. I didn't like it anymore. Didn't like it any less. Let's go on to the next. The next thing that I read this month was Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin. And I think I gave that a 3 out of 5 stars. It was not my favorite. It was very, very graphic, which is usually not a problem for me, but I did not enjoy it all that much. It was just very, very much not my thing. I'm not going to talk too much about any of these short stories, actually, just because I don't want to spoil them, because they're very short, and so I'll move on to the next. I also read Everyday Use by Alice Walker, which I loved. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was good. I loved it. It made me so sad. It made me cry. Can't complain about something that makes me cry, right? The next story that I read was The Swimmer by John Cheever, and I did not really get that story. It didn't make a lot of sense to me until we had to write about it in class, and a whole bunch of people were talking about how he was probably an alcoholic, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. The story didn't make any sense to me. It was about a guy, he swam across the county by swimming through a whole bunch of different people's swimming pools. And I didn't quite understand it, but that's okay. Sometimes it happens. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was well written. I just didn't really understand what it was supposed to be saying. The next short story that I read was Good Country People by Flannery O'Connor, and I loved it. It was a 4 out of 5 for me. It was really good. It was very weird. It was not exactly what I was expecting it to be, but I liked it. I have trouble really, really loving books that I read for class, or even short stories, because I have to analyze them. So it just kind of ruins the experience of getting into it for me, but I did enjoy it. It was good. Not much more can be said about it. The last short story that I read this month was Cathedral by Raymond Carver. This kind of follows this man who's prejudiced against a blind man who's coming to stay with him and his wife, and the blind man is his wife's friend, but he probably has some harbored jealousy there. I liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was a very heartwarming story about a man growing out of his prejudices and learning to accept people for who they are and love despite jealousy. I thought it was written very well. I enjoyed reading it. Again, I read it for class, so the enjoyment probably would have been greater if I had not been reading it for class, but it was pretty good. I also forgot to mention, I read this book called That's a Fact, Jack, and I read it with my boyfriend. We sat in the kitchen, and anytime he'd cook for me, I would read him facts out loud, and we just kind of made our way through the book. It was kind of fun. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Some of the facts were kind of questionable, and there were no sources listed, but that's fine. It was fun. I feel like I learned some things. Basically, the book is just filled with a ton of random facts about things you wouldn't even think of. So, pretty happy with that. It was nice. It was exactly what it said it was. So, thank you for watching my video. This is everything that I read in the month of October. I hope to see you next time. Bye!